Okay, good afternoon everyone. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of Oren and our involvement in this exciting project that Abbas and Sarah are leading through the University of Melbourne, but working across government. So Oren, we're funded through the federal government, Department of Innovation, through the Education Infrastructure Fund, which is through their Super Science initiative. So we've got 4 years of funding, initial funding, where our primary goal is to support urban research across Australia, and urban researchers being quite broad, could be researchers in local council, state government, primarily universities though, to really inform real world issues like was outlined by Ian in his presentation. So an evidence-based approach through providing better access to data sets to researchers and the models and tools to enable better outputs. So University of Melbourne is the lead agent for Oren, but it is run as a national network. So it's very much a team-based approach, and whilst it's it's probably our flagship project that Abbas and Sarah and the team are leading for us, it very much is a team approach where we look at these projects as collaborations. So there's the core team there, and we've got the director, Bob Stimson, here today. So, Bob, did you want to say a couple of words? Or? Okay, so we've got Bob, we've got Professor Richard Sinnott, who's our e-research director at university, who is guiding the technical architecture, and we've got our core team. But very much working across projects like the Northwest Melbourne project to open up data sets where we can and enable better access to the urban research constituents that we have across the country. So being able to look at investment into projects that we can look at providing access to data sets, the creation of new tools like the agent-based tool that Marcus and the walkability team are creating, visualization tools, what-if exploration tools, and looking at land suitability that the housing demonstrator and Wilson and Abbas and the team are looking at. And then providing e-infrastructure that supports collaboration. So these data sets and these outputs can then really inform wicked problems that are being encountered, driven by population growth and ageing population and so forth. And it's really much a user-driven approach. We've got a technical architecture, which I'll give a brief glance introduction to, but it's really going to be driven by users accessing tools and data sets. And while there's a lot of tools and data sets out there, they're not always necessarily that accessible in a timely fashion or a cost-efficient fashion that researchers can actually grasp. So we have these 10 aspirational lenses. They're kind of our research communities. They actually blend over to a certain degree, but we have to structure the project in some shape or form. So these are the kind of core drivers for Oren, where we're looking at making an investment and setting up collaborations. And we've got, this particular project goes across a number of those lenses where we're looking at issues of transport, looking at population health, and urban health and so forth. So we're very much building a national e-infrastructure. So we call it e-infrastructure because it's basically online infrastructure where those data sets can be accessed, they can be downloaded where it's permissible, they can be shared where it's permissible via this kind of online interface where we've got a portal as a front end, a kind of sophisticated website. So we've got a number of projects. We've got about 20 projects currently funded across the country. As I said before, this is our flagship project where we really see this as a data hub for Victoria. So working with you all across government in being able to realise a vision where we can share data sets more seamlessly to support evidence-based decision making. So that's a high level view of the actual technical infrastructure where we have a number of databases. Some of those might reside in organisations across government and the RMF that Ian put up before, and then some of those might be coming through other agencies like the Australian Bureau of Statistics that are really supportive of this initiative, and we're looking at operationalising a data hub directly into the ABS very soon. Then you've got mapping, graphing, charting, and some of the tools that the demonstration teams will be presenting that we want to see through a knowledge transfer way that those tools can then be made more accessible to inform decision makers and have government people actually interact with these tools. So there's our horrendogram of the technical architecture. I'm not going to go into any detail about that. We do have some technical papers, or Professor Richard Sinnott and Martin Tomko, who are heading up the technical architecture team, can provide more information. Basically, it's open source. So as a contribution back to the research community in the IT area, also these tools and the code will be open, so others can also develop on that. So this project will have access to that code also. So value-added tools beyond the life of this project can be created and used. We do have a beta version of the portal up and running, and it's governed through this security protocol, which is similar to what you have accessing your bank online. I won't go into details about that, but they do call it the Australian Access Federation. I think some Star Trek fans came up with that one. If you actually then go into our portal, you can then look at various data sets and drill in, and you can start to then access road data, a number of the 50 data sets that Bus introduced in his presentation. We're hoping now at the end of the project they'll be accessible in some shape or form, either via download or via online interrogation through the portal to support this evidence-based approach to decision making. So we can then zoom into particular areas of interest, we can shop for data sets, and then we can run some statistical analyses, some spatial algorithms and so forth. So just a couple of screenshots. We're setting it up as a federated infrastructure. That's really important because what that means is we're not about trying to take data sets from the custodian. We want that data to be looked after and be housed by that custodian, and we have a link directly to that data set. We're working with Neil Smith, who's in the audience, and others, with existing infrastructure that government have put in place, like the VicGIS infrastructure. So we can actually talk to that infrastructure and not do a data dump necessarily. If it's real-time data, we want that data to come from the authoritative source. So we can then use some of the sophisticated tools, and we've got some regression analyses and some other advanced tools like shift share, location quotient tools coming out of Bolts through the University of Queensland and being brought online. So taking that expertise and that wealth of experience of urban researchers and the tools that are being developed around the country and make those accessible via this portal. So you can start to run regression, correlation analyses, a whole bunch of spatial statistical approaches on those data sets to inform this evidence-based approach to decision making and planning in Victoria. You can then formulate your choropleth maps and so forth via the portal, or you might want to download that data into SPSS or a GIS tool or even Excel and do your analyses there if permissible. So next steps, we're looking at rolling out this approach across the country, so setting up data hubs like the Northwest Melbourne Data Hub. So we don't want to set up data hubs from scratch. It's got to build upon expertise and collaboration and willingness of government departments and core university partners to actually look at making those data sets accessible to the urban research community. Some advanced statistical routines, visualization approaches that we're bringing on board. And then some exciting spatial modelling tools like the walkability tool that you'll see today, and there's other tools to support what-if scenario planning. We also importantly are looking at training and workshops, so the kind of data sets and the infrastructure that you see, how do you use that as an end user, as someone in government, in a local council, or even in university as a PhD student, how can you actually use these tools and access these data sets? We do have the website up as well as the portal, and there is a newsletter. We have about 600 people, I think, subscribing to our newsletter. It's open to everyone. So if you want to go to the website, you can actually go in and we have our newsletter also and updates of data sets and so forth as they come online. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Chris on Orange? Yes, Christine.
Chris, you mentioned being able to download. Do you see many constraints on downloadability of particularly GIS layers? I mean, apart from size constraints, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about permissions.
That's a good question, Christine. It will come down to the licensing issues of the data custodian that we abide by. So the likes of ABS, they're under Creative Commons, so those data sets can be downloaded, and those disaggregate levels of geography down to, say, the SA2 can be downloaded. But getting down to finer scale data, that'll be up to the custodian if it's releasable or not. There's a whole bunch of ways that we can disable download, and we will only enable download if it's permissible. Working with, say, Big Health, their population health survey, that data won't be downloadable, but you can interrogate it. So it depends on how sensitive the data is. Other data sets, like, well, we've got access to OpenStreetMap at the moment. That's obviously freely available. It's crowd-sourced data, so that could be downloaded. So again, that will be up to the permissions that are set by the custodian.
Can I have one more question? And if, by putting a whole lot of stuff together, you start to reveal things that have not been revealed previously, and you're researching within, so if you're working within the portal itself, presumably there may be some sign-on. What about researchers? Are you relying on their own ethics arrangements for things like that?
Well, there's data agreements in place, so as a user you have to sign up to those data agreements by the fact that you go in and then come and access the portal. So we'll be monitoring, we've got the ability to monitor users' behaviour. So if anyone tries to do something contrary, we can at least monitor that as best we can. For those data sets that are more sensitive in those projects, then we suggest that we don't enable download as a default. We're not saying that is the default, so there would only be, and there could also be, there's a fine scale of access. You might only want 10 people to access that data set as a demonstration to others within your organisation. So we can set that fine scale of access also. But it is a real issue. We have our contracts officer who's looking at all the legalities, working with those projects like OSCOL nationally that are looking at the issues around licensing and sharing and reuse. And it does raise issues around commercial use. A lot of our licenses are for research purposes only. So, a researcher who wants to grab some data and then set up a commercial kind of venture typically won't be able to do that with a number of our data sets. So.
Okay. Sorry. And that's one thing we've found as the public sector release information framework is helping to unlock as well. So coming up from a number of angles.